Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. So it's been quite a while since I've uploaded a video, but I've got a really exciting one for you today. I am giving you a tour of my new garden. So this garden is located in Spokane, Washington. And if you've watched any of my earlier videos, you probably know that I previously lived and gardened in San Diego. So I actually still live in San Diego, but my parents have moved up here to Spokane, Washington. And so now I get to garden up here. And I won't be living here full time. But I'm planning on coming back kind of as often as I can to design and plant the gardens. And then in the days that I'm not here, there is a maintenance gardener that is going to come once a week just to kind of mow the lawn, deadhead the roses, things like that. Anyway, we are standing on the back patio right now. If you were to spin a little bit, you would see the house and the kitchen and stuff like that. But so this flower bed behind me is kind of the first part of the garden when you first walk out of the house. You can see there's a big fir tree, a couple of strawberries. These look to be, I'm guessing a June-bearing type strawberry. And then there's some other like wild alpine type around the back of the bed. And then there's some other, a couple of impatiens, a sweet alyssum. There's lots of creeping jenny in this garden just as ground cover, which I know some people don't particularly love. I personally really like it. I think the chartreuse color brings a really nice kind of like energizing feel to the garden. So some people consider it kind of a noxious weed. I personally love it though, so I'm planning on keeping the vast majority of it. And then over to my right, you can see I have a pretty big Hosta. I'm not sure what variety it is, but it's an awesome looking one, so it will definitely stay there. And then a couple of hellebores. There's a peony back in the back. I don't know that the peony is getting enough sun, so eventually it will probably get moved to a sunnier part of the garden, but for now I'm going to let it ride. And then this kind of tree above me, this is a lilac tree. It definitely needs some help. It looks good from a distance, but if you get close to it, there's quite a bit of dead wood and stuff that needs pruned out. We are planning on having an arborist come in the next couple months or so, just to prune out the dead wood. Now would be a really bad time to prune the lilac, because it has already set the buds for next year's blooms. So you don't want to cut any of the living tissue because you're just cutting off the blooms that are going to come next spring/summer. But it's totally fine to prune the dead wood right now, so that's what we're going to do. But anyway, and I will move around to the other side of the bed and give you a look at what that looks like. Okay, so now I'm on the back side of the bed that we were just looking at. You can see the fir tree off to my right, and then underneath it there's a whole bunch of Alpine Strawberries. There is a lot of weeds in this garden. I haven't really done anything. I've pulled a couple weeds here and there, but other than that, this garden is exactly the way it looked when we got the house last week. I've been waiting to do anything major until I filmed this video and gave you all a look at it. But like I said, there's just kind of some like wild strawberries under here on the backside. This is a Sem False Spirea. Luckily the tag was still on it. I would have never known that. And it doesn't look like much right now, but it's gonna get probably a good 6 foot tall. So that one will definitely be one that needs to be kind of pruned down to be kept a little smaller. There's another Hosta back there that's kind of hidden by some of the other stuff. And then on the left side of the bed, there really is not much. There's a hellebore in there, and then a couple of astilbes, and then a little bit of creeping jenny. This bed will probably get this bed will absolutely get completely redone. It does not look very good right now. I will save the hellebore, probably transplant it to a different part of the garden, but everything else, like the astilbe and the creeping jenny, I'll probably just yank all that. It doesn't look all that good, and I'm not super happy with it. And then moving just over to the side from the bed that we just looked at, this is one of my favorite parts of the garden. It doesn't look like much right now, but this right here is actually a weeping crabapple tree, and it is covered in little crab apples. I have no idea what the variety is. I'm hoping that when it blooms next spring, I'll get a better idea. But it's not all that big, and it's definitely been here for a number of years. So that is one plant that is absolutely staying. I definitely love that tree. But there's this big shrub right in front of it, so this guy is gonna come out. Next week, actually, we are having the gardener come and just help us with some of the bigger projects, like taking this big shrub out. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but in all honesty, I don't really care. It's just kind of in the way where it is, and it's completely blocking the crabapple tree. You can't see the trunk of it at all. So I'm thinking that once we get this guy out, it will kind of open up this bed. And then there's just a whole bunch of weeds that need pulled. So that is kind of the project this fall, is to just get kind of the weeds under control. Eventually, this will all be filled with like nice flowering perennials and mulch and stuff like that. But for the meantime, the biggest priority is just getting it kind of cleaned up a little bit. And then moving just a couple of feet down to my left from where we just were standing, this side of the garden, there's an Heirloom Rose kind of back in the corner. It does not look like it has been pruned in years. So next spring, or maybe even this fall, that rose is going to get a really good pruning. I think some pruning and fertilization will breathe a lot of new life into that rose. It definitely needs some help. And then there's just a whole bunch of ornamental grasses. I'm honestly not the biggest fan of ornamental grasses, so these two, a little bit more green ones that are just kind of in the front, those are actually going to come out next week. I'm going to dig them out, and then I have a pair of David Austin roses that I moved from my garden in San Diego that are going to take its place. And then a similar story in this side of the garden, just a whole bunch of weeds that need pulled. Okay, now we are in the back corner of the garden, just a couple feet down again from where we were last standing. In this area, there's some type of rose right here. I think it's actually a climbing rose that just hasn't been given anything to climb on. So I will need to do something with that. Either it'll probably just get transplanted back to along the fence so that and then given a trellis so that it has something to climb on. I would like to figure out what type of rose it is before I do that, because if it's one that I really don't like, I might not keep it. In that case, I would probably find like a neighbor or a friend or somebody here in the area that wants it. All of the good plants that still look really good, that I decide that I don't want, I'm not just gonna dump in the trash. I will find like a family or friend, I mean, I guess we don't have any family here, but someone to take them. Even if I just end up giving them away for free on Facebook Marketplace, I am going to try my hardest to not throw away any like good, viable plants. The weeds and some of the stuff that's overgrown is just gonna have to get dumped in the trash, but everything else, I'm gonna try my best to either transplant to other parts of the garden or like give away to someone. Anyway, in this area, there is a whole bunch more astilbe, there's a couple of hostas here, and then in the back, there's a few daylilies spotted here and there. I personally don't love daylilies, but they look good, so they're probably just going to stay for the time being. And then this area of the garden is probably the worst in terms of weeds. The vast majority of it is covered in weeds. So it looks pretty full right now. There's actually only a few perennials kind of dotted here and there that are going to stay. The rest of it just kind of needs yanked. And then over on this side, there's a pair of Hydrangea Macrophyllas. In my experience, Hydrangea Macrophyllas, the common name is bigleaf hydrangea, they don't do as well in cold winter areas. So these ones look okay, so they'll stay for now. But I'm kind of in long-term planning. They will probably eventually get replaced with Hydrangea paniculata. I actually have a couple sitting up on the patio that are going to go somewhere in the garden. But I don't think that the Hydrangea Macrophylla are going to be a really good long-term choice for this garden. I have just personally found they seem to do better in kind of warmer winter areas. Like down in San Diego, if they're given enough water and enough shade, they do great. Up here in Spokane, I don't think they're going to do all that well. But I will give them the opportunity to prove me wrong. And then moving down on my left, there's a whole bunch of hostas. That's the kind of almost chartreuse green one. That is the only one that I kind of have a hunch of the variety. I think that is the Coast to Coast Hosta, which is one of my favorites. I even bought another one to put somewhere else in the garden. I'm not entirely sure, but that is my guess as to what it is. But anyway, I will keep moving and show you further down this side. Okay, so here's the Coast to Coast Hosta that I was just talking about, and then a couple of other hostas. Not totally sure of the variety, but I absolutely love them, so I'm going to keep them. And then a little bit of astilbe back, kind of in between the hostas. All of this stuff, though, is just weeds. All of that stuff needs pulled. So I will be spending a lot of time on my hands and knees in the next couple days, just trying to get this part of the garden under control. Okay, so now we are just another few feet down, and you can see there's a great big tree here in the middle. This tree is kind of one of the really big parts of the yard. The infrastructure in this garden is gorgeous. As much as the flowering perennials and stuff need a little bit of help, the stuff like this, like the big trees, are absolutely wonderful. And so I'm really excited to be able to kind of take over this garden and continue along with some of this really wonderful infrastructure that's already in place. But this tree kind of denotes the last part of the garden where they were doing like flowering perennials. They kind of did it up until this tree, because up until this tree is the most visible part of the yard from the house. But then you'll see as we go down, there's a lot less plants and a lot more weeds. But anyway, there is just a couple of hostas under here, a couple of ornamental grasses, and then a daylily. That daylily to me doesn't look like it's getting enough light. And like I said, I don't love daylilies, so I don't know that that one is going to stay long term. But for now, I'll just kind of let it ride until I find something that I like better to go in its place. Okay, so once again, I'm just a few feet down from where we were last standing. This part of the garden doesn't have a whole bunch. There's a couple of geranium incanums, I think, that have kind of taken over this part. Other than that, there's a rose. Again, no idea of the variety, and this one hasn't bloomed, so I really don't know anything about that rose. But other than that, not much in this area. Okay, and then now we are at the other corner of the yard. You can see the biggest thing. This is another one of the biggest trees in the yard. This is a weeping cherry, a weeping flowering cherry. It's not going to produce any fruit, but I'm super excited to see this bloom next spring. I love weeping trees, especially ones this big. Unfortunately, the shape of the tree is really not so good. Like I mentioned earlier, we're having an arborist come out to kind of give us a better idea of what needs to happen with the trees. We don't want to take any of them out. Eventually, it might be necessary just because the structure of this tree and one of the other ones is just really awful. But hopefully, we're having the arborist come out now to hopefully kind of stave off that problem. But then underneath it, there's a couple of a good-sized cypress. At least that's what I think it is. It's some type of relatively small evergreen. A bunch more Hostilbe, and then in the back there's a couple of hostas. The hostas don't look so good. I think they just kind of need a little bit more water and more fertilization. But not much in this area. Okay, now we are on the other side of the garden, facing the original first flower bed that has the weeping crabapple. We are directly across the lawn from that. And this side, there's a couple of barberries that are pretty good size, more Hostilbe, another Hydrangea Macrophyllas, another Hosta, and that's about it. Besides a whole bunch of weeds in the front of the bed that need pulled. Okay, now we are in the kind of the front corner of the yard. Underneath our purple flowering plum. This again is just grown for the flowers and the red foliage. It isn't going to produce any fruit. This is another tree that the structure leaves a little bit to be desired. I think it's having a problem with borers. And according to the maintenance gardener, we are using the same one that the old owners used. He let us know that it's been losing a lot of really big branches in the last couple of years. And so I'm hoping that by getting the arborist out, he can kind of tell us if there's any more that are really at risk of falling, and kind of help us diagnose what exactly needs to happen with this tree. It's a great big tree, so I don't want to take it out. Eventually though, I think it'll probably be necessary. And other than that, there is just some big shrubs, some more, I think they're cypress, I'm not entirely positive though, but whatever that evergreen on the other side is, there's a couple more of them up here. But not a whole bunch going on in this side of the yard. Okay, now we have swung around, and we are back to kind of the side of the garden where they put a lot more time and effort into planting like flowering plants. So on my right, we've got a little sport court on the side, and then the bed starts again and then kind of loops around. This plant right here, this is a tricolor beech. This is my favorite plant probably in the entire garden. I absolutely love tricolor beeches, and so I was thrilled to find out that there's one in the garden already. It is burning quite bad, just I think from the summer. I'm guessing it'll probably do that every summer. But I'm really excited to see what this tree does next spring when the foliage isn't covered in like kind of the brown crunchiness. This tree probably is going to get too big for this area eventually. And so we are just going to work to make sure that we keep it small enough to keep it like right there next to the house. Like I said though, I absolutely love the tricolor beeches, and so I don't want to get rid of it. And then below it, there's a whole bunch of more like just kind of hostas, a couple dianthus, a couple daylilies, just a whole bunch of like kind of flowering shrubs, in addition to a ton of weeds that need pulled, and then a whole bunch of creeping Jenny ground cover. Okay, and then on this side, you can see there's whatever this big evergreen tree is. I haven't figured that out yet, but it is, we're just kind of on the other side of it. And then I've got a little Boxwood Topiary. You can probably see my little intern walking around. That's Archie the poodle. But this, anyway, this is a little Boxwood Topiary. That one actually started its life as a regular old 5-gallon that I pruned up into that shape. And so that was one that I definitely wanted to make sure we moved from California. I mean, obviously isn't an expensive plant, but it just has some kind of sentimental value because I like grew it and pruned it into that shape myself. But then other than that, there's just a couple of another shrub that, again, I'm not quite sure what it is. And then some type of evergreen and more creeping jenny. And then on this side, you can see we are very much still in the process of moving. We have like random benches and patio heaters and stuff kind of laying all over the garden. But this is another one of the beds where they clearly put some time and money into planting plants. There's a couple of Brunnera that I think the Brunnera is getting too much sun. Same with this hellebore. You probably can't see it because of the bench. I'm not going to move the bench though because the Brunnera and the hellebore don't look so good. So you don't need a close-up on that. But the Brunnera and the hellebore will probably get moved to the other side of the garden, just so that they get a little bit more shade. They get almost full sunlight here, which I think is just too much for them. And then on the other side, there's a couple more dianthus, a lot more creeping jenny, and then there's some vines up on the house. I'm not sure what all of the vines are. I can see some climbing roses, some clematis, and then just kind of some other random things. There's a couple hollyhocks in this area. Once I get the weeds pulled, I think I'll have a much better idea of kind of what's here and what I want to keep and what I don't want to keep. There's some plants that I know right off the bat are going to have to come out because they're blocking the sprinklers. You might be able to see there's a little bit of like browning in the lawn because some of the plants in the bed are just blocking the sprinklers from getting water, the sprinklers from getting to the entire area of lawn. But anyway, that is kind of the last part of the garden. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel down below. I will be making lots more videos showing you everything in this garden, from just pulling the weeds and kind of my initial planting to maintaining it down the road. But like I said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.